Exposed. Written by Suzana Thompson. Narrated by Lauren Sweet. Chapter 5. I woke up as intensely aroused as I had been in the dream, and I sprang out of bed to prevent myself from giving in to the temptation to relieve the ache between my legs. A cold shower did nothing but leave me chilled and still aroused. Trying to distract myself, I browsed a recipe site for ideas about what to make for dinner. I had received a text from Mason before I even arrived home last night. Address was the one-word prompt. I texted him the information immediately after parking in my driveway, not wanting to delay and be accused of ignoring his text. He replied with a reminder of the time he was coming over, 6 o'clock. I decided on a chicken dish, figuring that everybody liked chicken. Unless he was a vegetarian, in which case he could stuff it for all I cared. It would be his fault for not informing me and for inviting himself to dinner in the first place. I mentioned it casually to Mom and Dad during breakfast. "A friend is coming over for dinner today." "Addison?" Dad asked. "No," I said. "Another friend." "Oh?" he inquired, since I never had anyone but Addison come over. "What's her name?" I began, already failing at saying it nonchalantly. "It's, Mason." Mom perked up. "A boy? You finally got a boyfriend?" "No," I quickly denied. "He's just a friend." "Is he cute?" she asked, showing more enthusiasm for this than she ever had for anything else in my life. I shrugged, not wanting to say anything to encourage her. If it were any other boy but Mason, it might have been fun to show him off to Mom and bask in her approval for once. She thought I was boring and took no interest in me. Dad was frowning. "Why haven't you ever mentioned him before? How long have you been friends?" "Not long," I replied, feeling the nervous tension start in my stomach at the thought of sitting through dinner with Mason while Dad scrutinized our supposed friendship. Would he pick up on anything wrong between us? At least Mom would be too thrilled that I had brought a cute boy home to notice anything. "A new friend," he said. "What's his last name?" As if that would give him any insight about Mason. "Sumner," I answered, my gaze sliding toward Mom to see if she reacted to the last name of the man who had died in bed with her. Nothing. Maybe she didn't even remember his name. It would infuriate Mason if he knew that, and I sure hoped that he didn't mention his father to her. This dinner would be like walking through a minefield, and my anxiety spiked as the dreaded time approached. Mason arrived 5 minutes early, and Dad beat me to the door. "Hello, sir." Mason greeted him as he extended his hand toward him. "I'm Mason Sumner." "Ella's friend," Dad noted as he shook his hand. "I'm her father, Charles Bradley." Mason's gaze shifted to me, and I reacted nervously. "Let him in, Dad," I prompted. "Sure. Come in, Mason," he said as he stepped back and allowed him entrance. Mason was still studying me as he stepped inside, so he saw me cringe at the sound of my mother's voice. "Ella, you didn't say a word about how handsome your boyfriend is. Hello there, I'm Ella's sister," Mason cut in smoothly. Mom laughed in delight, so obviously flattered, like she always was when people mistook her for my sister. Only I knew that Mason had done it deliberately to annoy me. "I'm her mother," she told him. "I told you that he's not my boyfriend," I huffed as I turned to confront her. She was wearing a vibrant red dress that was an obvious attempt to show me up, since I was dressed casually in comfortable jeans and a t-shirt. My own mother was competing against me for looks, and she was the clear winner today. "It's very nice to meet you, ma'am. I'm Mason Sumner." I whirled back toward him. Dinner's ready, I announced loudly, but his gaze was locked on my mother. It's a pleasure to meet you, too, she replied. Come and sit down. I know that Ella can't wait to impress you with her cooking. It smells delicious, he said, his eyes glinting dangerously as his gaze lingered on her. With dread settling in the pit of my stomach, I went to the kitchen, but Mason followed me, declaring lightly, I'll help. Once there, his expression became stone hard as it cut to me, but he didn't say anything. I glanced away and moved toward the stove. He grabbed the oven mitts before I could reach them and put them on. I'll carry it, he said in a harsh tone. You get the rest. He picked the pan up off the stovetop where I had set it after taking it out of the oven, and I silently followed him out to the dining room with the grilled asparagus. Since the chicken breasts I'd made were stuffed with spinach and cheese and wrapped in phyllo, they needed no other side dishes. After Mason sat down, I was left with the seat across from him. Dad waited until everyone had filled their plates before he started his interrogation. So, you're a classmate of Ella's, Mason? Yes, sir, he answered as he cut into his chicken breast. And you just recently became friends? Yes, sir, Mason replied without missing a beat. I got to know her because of Addison. She's my friend too. Mason talked over me, cutting off my explanation that Addison was his girlfriend. We've been friends for a while. I wondered why he would lie about that. But then I realized that it would seem strange if I had invited my best friend's boyfriend over without her. That had actually been a good save on his part, and I started to let go of my fear that he would say something awful in front of my parents. Oh, Dad responded, apparently happily surprised. Addison is a nice girl. Or a backstabbing bitch, I thought, as I kept my expression neutral. Mason just mumbled, yeah. So, what do your parents do? Dad, I protested, but Mason chose to answer him. Well, my father died, and my mother has been blowing through his fortune ever since. All three of us stared at him while he took a bite of the chicken breast and chewed. This is good. I am impressed. Mom recovered first. I'm sorry to hear that, Mason. When did he die? He looked directly at her. 5 years ago. It was a heart attack. Sad, she remarked, still oblivious to Mason's connection to the man who died while having sex with her. His jaw clenched as he dropped his gaze down to his plate. I'm sorry for your loss, Dad said. Thanks, he muttered. We ate in silence for a bit, using the food as a distraction. At least I was, because I barely tasted it. Dad ventured to speak to Mason again. Regarding college, there are many options available, from scholarships to financial aid. Oh, she's far from out of money, Mason assured him. There was quite a lot of it. We had an estate with a live-in housekeeping staff. His gaze slid toward Mom again, but she was listening with a pleasant expression on her face. Well, I'm glad to hear that paying for college won't be a concern, Dad said. Do you know what you want to study? I'm not sure yet, Mason replied. Maybe photography. He looked directly at me then, and my heart seized. Photography? Dad questioned, sounding unsure. Is that your hobby? Yes, Mason answered, still watching me. It's true what they say about a picture being worth 1,000 words. You should have Ella pose for you, Mom suggested excitedly. I've been trying to talk her into getting into modeling, but she doesn't have any confidence. Maybe you could convince her. She might listen to you, since you're a photographer. Don't you think she's beautiful? He had been smirking at me while she spoke, but his expression altered with that question and made me uncomfortable in a different way. The look in his eyes momentarily made me believe that he meant the next words he spoke.
She's very beautiful.
Dad cleared his throat.
Yes, we'd like to see the pictures you take of her.
Mason's attention was on him now.
Of course,
he said, before sliding a sly look at me. My stomach teetered back into anxiety. I wasn't sure if Mason was just toying with me, or if he planned to end this dinner by showing my parents that horrible picture. It would be an indirect way of taking revenge on my mom, but it would do much worse damage to me. I would never get over it if Dad saw that picture. He would be so ashamed of me, and he would regret adopting me. I spent the entire meal on pins and needles as Mason ate.
Well, that was delicious,
he remarked in satisfaction as he set down his fork.
I'll help clean up, and then we can go work on our assignment.
My gaze flew to his, wondering what he was up to now. I'll clear the table, Mom said. You go ahead and work on your homework.
What assignment? Dad questioned. School hasn't even started yet. It's for extra credit,
Mason lied.
AP English gives us a list of novels we can read over the summer and do a creative project on. We're going to make a video for the Scarlet Letter.
He stood up, and I immediately followed his lead. He started toward the stairs and stood back at the base of them to let me pass and walk up ahead of him. I had no choice but to take him to my room. He glanced around as I shut the door and waited for him to tell me what was going on. His gaze was fixed on the letters I had attached to the wall above my bed, spelling out a quote I liked. Turn your face to the sun, and the shadows fall behind you. He turned suddenly and stalked toward me.
What's my father's name?
He demanded with a fierce expression. Daniel Sumner, I answered instantly, and Mason halted in surprise.
You know it, he said, but your mother doesn't. She doesn't even remember the name of the man she killed.
She didn't kill him, I protested. She just happened to be with him when he had his heart attack. But it would have happened even if she wasn't there. He could have been doing anything else, and it still would have happened. Why can't you get that? He stepped away from me without replying and wandered around my room. I watched him peruse the books on my bookcase and even stood by as he opened my closet and peered inside. When he began rifling through my desk drawer, however, I moved to stop him. He had already snatched my journal out of it, though, since it was right on top due to being used often. I hadn't ever had to hide it from anyone, and I hadn't expected Mason to be in my room today, let alone be snooping through my stuff. Give me it, I demanded in outrage as I tried to grab it from him.
Stop, he commanded, or I'll show your stepfather that picture right now. I mean it, Ella.
I halted, as much from the jolt of hearing him say my name as what he threatened to do. Mason never called me by my name. He rarely spoke to me at all, but when he did, he avoided addressing me at all, using only the pronoun you when he had to. Mason, I said, using his name as well in an attempt to be pleasant. Please give my journal.
Is it your diary?
He questioned. No, I replied, exceedingly glad that I didn't have a diary for him to find. It's just a journal I kept for English. He regarded me speculatively.
Well, then you don't need it anymore,
he declared. It's mine, I exclaimed, losing my composure.
Which makes it mine,
he stated coolly, before his gaze hardened.
I own you, and you better not forget it. I told you you'd pay for not following instructions, and I'm taking this as my payment. Do what I tell you from now on, and you won't have a problem.
This is my problem, I retorted. How would you like it if I bossed you around and took your stuff? I bet you'd—
No arguing,
he snapped.
I was just in the same room as your mother, and I'm not in the best mood, so don't push me.
His warning stopped my protests. He was clearly on edge, and he wouldn't listen to me anyway. The journal wasn't as mortifying as the picture. In fact, It would be boring to anyone else but me, since it only contained poetry that I had written. I had lied that it was for a school assignment, but he wouldn't know that. He set it down on my desk and pulled a folded piece of paper out of his pocket.
"We'll shoot this scene,"
he said as he handed it to me.
"The first line is mine, and then yours."
I unfolded it and glanced at it before looking at him in bewilderment. You really want to make a Scarlet Letter video?
"In case your dad asks about it,"
he said as he pulled out his phone.
"You film me first, then hit pause."
I stilled when he handed the phone to me, but he was quick to remind me that he had more copies of that picture. So I squashed my urge to smash his phone to bits and prepared to film him. Without any preparation himself, he stated,
"Ready."
Starting the video, I watched him on the screen.
"Come along, Madame Hester,"
he said,
"and show your scarlet letter in the marketplace."
When he didn't say anything else, I paused the video. He moved out of his stance and took the phone from me.
"Your turn. Memorize your line and then I'll film you."
I looked at the paper he had given me and silently read my line several times before setting the paper down and facing him. Thou knowest that I was frank with thee. I felt no love, nor feigned any. It felt odd to hear him speak his next line.
"True. It was my folly. I drew thee into my heart."
Mine was simple and brief. I have greatly wronged thee. His gaze was hard as he spoke.
"Think not that I shall interfere with heaven's own method of retribution."
Thy acts are like mercy, but thy words interpret thee as a terror. His final line was spoken with a look of dark satisfaction.
"Whether of right or wrong, thou and thine, Hester Payne, belong to me."
I stared at his face on the screen for a moment before his mocking smile made me realize that he was done. I hit pause, still unnerved by his delivery of that line. He plucked the phone from my hand.
"I'll send it to your phone. See me out now."
He picked up my journal and started for the door. I followed him downstairs, where he politely thanked my parents for dinner. Mom fawned over him and invited him to come back soon. It was awkward as hell for me to watch, and I couldn't wait for Mason to leave. Fortunately, she didn't follow him to the front door. I opened it for him, and he made my pulse jump by suddenly leaning in to whisper in my ear.
"Not a word to her about who I am."
My startled gaze met his. It was almost like he had read my mind, because I had been silently debating whether I should inform my mom about who Mason's dad was. Even if she knew, what could she say to him? There were no words to placate him. He refused to acknowledge that she wasn't to blame for his father's death. Okay, I agreed to his demand.
"Wear the hot pink dress tomorrow,"
he said. Oh, that's a bridesmaid dress, I explained, thinking that he had no clue that such a dress could only be for a wedding.
"I know,"
he replied. I gaped at him. I can't wear that to school. I'll look ridiculous.
"Are you arguing with me?"
he demanded in a threatening tone.
"I warned you about that. Now I'll have to add something as punishment,"
he continued in a deceptively milder voice.
"What shall I do with you?"
You can kiss my ass, I hissed. His gaze honed in on me.
"Only if you show it to me again."
I went hot with embarrassment.
"See you tomorrow,"
he taunted, and left.